Another day, another administrative order threatened by Trump. This time he wants to eliminate mail-in ballots and voting machines, something that has been used for many years, something that we believe is left up to the states pursuant to the United States Constitution. Maybe Donald Trump doesn't know that. Maybe some of the not so bright lawyers around him can point that out, but that's what we're covering today. His threat to eliminate mail-in ballots and violate the Constitution. I'm Shant Karnikian. That's Brian Kabateck. Welcome back to Civil Action on the Legal AF Network. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more of this content. Brian, tell us a little bit about what Trump is threatening to do now.
Well, he says he's going to issue another executive order. This will be his 30,000th executive order. I'm joking, but probably not far off from true, that he wants to outlaw anything other than paper ballots. So first of all, it is 2025. It's not 1985. And as Shant pointed out before we got started, I can pay my insurance online. I can get movie tickets online. I can buy a car online. I can get my groceries online, and I can get somebody to come and pick me up to go to both the grocery store and the movie theater all online, except Donald Trump believes, I guess that's what happens when you're about 108 years old, is you think that the only way to do this is paper, right?
Well, I don't think it's 108, but yeah, it's kind of wild. Yeah, we're in the information age. You could do everything online. You could buy a house online, Brian. I could take on mountains of debt online.
I think you have.
That's probably
happened. But I think there's a couple of important things here. And let me just point this out first, which is there is a constitution in the United States, and kind of tongue in cheek, but I'm not sure Donald Trump completely either comprehends the Constitution or thinks that he has to follow it. That's part one. Part two is the Constitution actually says it's left to the states to decide the time, place, and manner of its elections for senators and for representatives and for all other purposes, with the exception of the fact that Congress can make rules, but they have not waded into this rulemaking issue about mail-in ballots, electronic voting, those sort of issues. That's part one, right?
That's in Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution. The language, I'm going to pull it up here. It specifically reads, the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, meaning the legislature of that state. But you're right, Brian, it does have a carve out and says, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations, period, end quote. Does it mention executive orders? No, it doesn't. It doesn't say Donald Trump, a failed reality show TV host and failed real estate developer, can sign a piece of paper and change that manner of election.
Right. So there's a lot also to talk about in this too, and I want to cover everything. But I think one of the things that people need to understand is kind of the background about why originally Republicans were opposed to anything other than absentee ballots. So back a long time ago when I was a new voter, there were absentee ballots, but you kind of had to qualify for them. You had to be able to say you weren't going to be available on election day and not show up on election day. And Republicans generally were okay with that because it was probably the Republicans who were off on a golf outing someplace and couldn't be there on election day. So they were happy with the absentee ballots. Then the expansion came where you had weeks ahead of the election, you could send in a mail-in ballot. There are certain states, I believe Oregon is one of them, that only allows mail-in voting. That's how voting takes place. And the reason that the Republicans started to dislike that was because it allowed the working class. It allowed people who had multiple jobs to vote. It allowed elderly. It allowed low income people who maybe not have transportation to the polling place. And we've all seen the voting polling places on election day with those lines that go around the block. So the idea was people who were going to vote Democrat largely would vote this way, and their votes would actually get counted. And shame on them, because we don't want Democrats' votes to be counted, right?
Yeah, and that's right. And I think this points out, an important a feature of the two parties, which is that there's this misconception that folks in rural areas that are working class are Republican. No, they're not. Traditionally, historically, and it hasn't changed that much, folks who are working class, who are minorities, folks who are lower income, tend to be Democrats. And in fact, the Republicans try to paint themselves as, the party of the farm workers and the party of the rural America. That's not necessarily true. The Republicans have tended to be business owners, people with big business interests, people with lots of money. And oftentimes those are the ones that are funding the party, people that have.
Well, I kind of part company with you a little bit on this, Shant, because I think as we've seen, especially with the MAGA movement, a lot more working class, blue collar people becoming MAGA voters. And so I think that's where the Republican Party has kind of struggled with this, because those very people that they were trying to disenfranchise are now voting for him, albeit potentially not in mass, but they are voting for him. So now they pivoted, though, to this, to supporting the claims that are completely unsubstantiated about voter fraud, right? And I think that's where this kind of lands now with Trump.
Yeah, this is a popular argument, right? That mail-in ballots make it susceptible to voter fraud. And let's not forget about electronic ballots too, voting machines, which make it so much easier to tally votes, as we talked about. We do so many things electronically nowadays, and it's just absurd to try to use paper, which I think leaves a lot more room for error and manipulation. But they're opposed to this because they say that, oh, this is susceptible to fraud. And there's allegations of it, but there's no proven widespread fraud when it comes to mail-in ballots. There just isn't.
No, it's exactly the opposite. It's like as many efforts as they made to try to prove massive fraud in 2020, it's not there. There's no evidence of it. Yeah, you can point out isolated cases probably on both sides, but they're isolated cases. An incident here or there doesn't throw an entire election. But I think also, and I just want to footnote this before we get back to the main discussion, which is the whole voter ID argument, which I've had, Republicans tell me, what's wrong with showing up with your ID, with your driver's license, with your state issued ID when you're going to vote? Well, first of all, it's another hurdle. And it's a hurdle that low income voters, that poor folks don't necessarily have and can overcome easily. And there's also no proof there that makes any difference with respect to voter fraud. So I just wanted to note that, but let's bring the conversation back to this idiocy about trying to nationalize the rules, violate the Constitution. And I think that the first stop there, Shant, is the presidential election, the year 2000, which is Al Gore and George Bush, right?
Right. The Bush v. Gore, the Supreme Court case where there was a dispute and how the Florida election law and regulations should be played out. And what did the Supreme Court do there, Brian? How does that mean to this?
It all goes back to Florida for a quick history lesson because it's a quarter century ago now. But what happened in that case is the Supreme Court said, look, Florida has certain rules about what ballots are going to count, what they're not going to count. And that's the rule and that's the law. And it's up to the state of Florida. So that supports the whole notion of the Article 1 of the Constitution that you mentioned. Then what got kind of spawned out of that was the Help America Vote Act of 2002, right? And that reinforced the idea that it's left to the states, and the whole notion, let's just take the title, Help America Vote Act.
Right. And it wasn't just that. Yes, I agree. The important point here is reinforce the state's authority and obligation to administer the elections, but it also it aimed to modernize the voting process and enhance access. So this bullshit executive order, this unconstitutional executive order he's now talking about, his new shiny U-bolt, it violates the spirit of what America tried to do, bipartisan, by the way, back in 2000. It violates Supreme Court decision. It violates the United States Constitution. I don't think Trump cares about any of that, but it does. I mean, that's the bottom line.
So I'll give you my final thoughts on this topic, Shant. What are we really talking about here? Well, I think if you look at the whole landscape of what's going on right now, the urging by Trump to redistrict in deep red states like Texas, these kind of actions is that the MAGA world, the Trump world, the Republicans know that the midterms are going to cause them serious trouble and that they could well lose the House. And so all of these are thinly veiled efforts to try to frankly steal an election themselves. And so, of course, look no further than somebody who claims that an election was stolen for them to themselves do everything they can to steal an election. I think that's what this is all about. And I think that this is going to go exactly the way it belongs, which is it's going to get struck down by the courts. and they're going to try to roll this out. And then they're going to come out crying that the judges are against them and that they're just trying to, make elections fair and free for people. And it's more of the ridiculousness. So as usual, Shant, you get the last word.
I think there's a lot of irony and hypocrisy in trying to do something like this, which is, like you said, yelling, kicking and screaming about an election being stolen. There's no proof, which has been dispelled and disproven multiple times now. But then going and blatantly trying to, before people's eyes, just right there out in the open, try to steal the election or manipulate the election result. I mean, we are and should be and have been a beacon of, democracy, a model for how free and fair elections should take place. Other countries look to us. And this totally undermines that. We're going to be the laughingstock of the international community if he tries to do some nonsense like this. But I think what it comes down to is what you said, that there's a fear that they're going to lose the midterms. He's going to lose his grip on Congress, and desperate times call for desperate measures. And that's all this is. This is just Donald Trump being desperate, doing desperate things, but it's illegal and it violates the Constitution. I agree. I think we'll struck down. I'm Shant Karnikian. That's Brian Kabateck. This has been Civil Action on the Legal AF Network. If you like this content, hit that subscribe button. We appreciate your feedback. We always check out the comments. If there's something you want to hear about, something you want us to analyze, please go ahead and chime in, and we'll see you on the next one.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.